So sound effects and music, I'm just going to do one or two examples. I'm not going to do sound effects to everything because once you see how you do the first one, the rest just rinse and repeat. And even at that, adding a sound isn't that much different than adding any other object. So first you start with your resource. You start with your sound file. You just drag and drop it into the asset area. In this case, it's a WAV file. And what you need to do is, in this case, it's not going to be a prefab. You're just going to drag and drop it right into the scene in which you want it to be used. Okay? Let's just rename this. When you drag and drop it, you'll then see the control for the audio source. And it's really pretty straightforward. Do you want it muted? Do you want it to play as soon as it's created? Do you want it to loop? So if you have background music, basically what we just did would create your background music. You'd have it play on awake, that way the music starts as soon as the scene starts. You'd put loop there, and that's about it. The other settings have to do like 3D sound settings, as well as like if a sound is emanating from a specific source, then as you approach it, it should get louder. As you walk away, it should get quieter. We're just doing really ambient sound, so we're not going to worry about that. So really, for this, it's just play on awake and loop. Now, these you'd want for music. Now, in this case, I don't want it to play on awake because it's already in the scene. Now, it doesn't really matter where you put it. It doesn't have a visual appearance, but we'll slide it off to the side anyways, just so it's not in the work area. And here's where things get very similar, because once again, we're going to create an object, a variable for the object rather, and then that way the GM can access and manipulate that object. So we're going to go back to BattleFlow, and we're going to add variable shows up here. So this time what we're dragging and dropping is from the hierarchy, not from the asset area. It's not a prefab. So we just put it there. And what we do is we come down here to the attack portion of our code. And this is, as you can tell by the name, a fire sound effect. So fire is so skill 2 was fire. So this is where we're checking if skill 2 is being used, and do it. Save it. Okay, and now we run it. So I'm going to press the number 2 key, and the sound of the fire plays. That easy. Now we're going to go ahead and add a sound effect for the monster attack, and this is handled somewhat differently, so I did want to demonstrate this too. But once we've demonstrated this, then really all bases have been covered. So what makes the monster attack growl different is the fact that it's a prefab. So since it doesn't already pre-exist in a scene, you can't just do this short quick link that we did. So what you have to do is first, let's get our sound, and drag and drop it into the asset area. We now go to our prefabs, and at one at a time we click on them, go back to our asset, and just drag and drop it. So you see this familiar audio source that we looked at before, but rather than the audio source being a standalone object, it's now simply a component of the monster. And then just rinse and repeat. Click on the next enemy, put on the audio source, next enemy, put on the audio source. Now we do have to make a tweak to this. We do not want it to play in awake because it will make this attack sound as soon as the monster is created. So we just have to make sure we fix that in all of them. Now by doing this, you don't have to create a variable like we did before, where we created a variable, attached a standalone object. Here, the audio source is actually part of the object, and like I said, the reason why we're handling it differently is because they're instantiated. Now this is a good example where you have multiple ways of doing the same type of task. You probably could put all the monster attacks right in the scene, but it would take extra coding, because at that point you would say, okay, if enemy name is this, play this sound effect. If enemy name is this, play this sound effect. So this way you are associating the specific sound effect to its corresponding monster. In this case we use the same sound effect, but clearly you would just drag and drop the different monster attack sounds to the different prefab monsters. And now the code for this is incredibly easy. It is just... So I went to the monster control, and that's where the attack animation is performed, so we might as well go ahead and put in the attack sound as well, again trying to keep similar housekeeping together. And rather than changing the sprite renderer, we're changing, or at least we're referring to the audio source, and we're just putting in play. And it looks a little bit different because whenever we've used get component, we always have this equal sign, and we say, okay, what we're doing to it. Here it just ends and says, okay, play. We're not changing anything, we're simply saying play. So let's go ahead and save that. We run it. And the monster attacked. One more time, we'll use the weaker attack. In this case, killed us with one hit, and so there's the game over. So that should just about do it. So again, it's just a matter of rinse and repeat now, depending, is the sound effect on a prefab, then you attach the sound directly to the object. If it's not a prefab and you want it available regardless of what gets spawned, like in this case you always want the fire sound because you're always going to have the playable character that uses it, then you can put it right into the scene. So two different ways of accomplishing the same thing.